more objectively at my own religious background, and at a certain point when I was about 17, I was in a very serious car accident, which got me interested in just death and mortality, and because I did have a brush with death, and so that I really wanted to just look at all these different religions, like what they had to say about that. And so I almost did my own, just let's see which one has the most convincing arguments. And Islam was like the last on my list, but when I did get there finally, it resonated in a way that I think led to my conversion, and ultimately to taking it very seriously and studying. I think initially some of the reason why I wanted to study it seriously was to make sure I didn't make a mistake. Because I think a lot of people have, especially in a California culture, we're allowed to dabble. So there are a lot of dabblers, and people will try something out to see how it fits. So, but I, the more I studied, I think the more, the stronger my faith got. It didn't get less, which wasn't the case with Christianity. For me, Christianity studying it was a crisis for me.
And did this create some kind of a crisis in the family itself, your parents and so on, or were they accepting?
I think my mother was very accepting.
Were you the first Muslim in the family?
I was first Muslim, although my older sister married a Jewish man and converted to Judaism. So conversion wasn't. She later left, that, but she practice Judaism for several years. So that wasn't something. And also my mother's uncle, George Fields, opened up a metaphysical bookstore in San Francisco in 1932, which is still there on Polk Street, called Fields Bookstore. And he was very interested in Buddhism and Sufism and Fourth Way, Gurdjieff. So, I came from an open-minded type of family like that. My father, on the other hand, I think was very perplexed by it. Bemused is probably a better word. And he, I think that he had the hardest time with it. But he has, of late, begun to study Ghazali and got very impressed with Ghazali, because my father loves Thomas Aquinas. And he saw a film that I was involved in about Ghazali, and it got him interested in Ghazali. And so he started reading him in translation, and now he's really convinced that Ghazali is one of the great religious thinkers of all time. And I think he's changed his attitude considerably.
If you were to suggest ways to improve relations between Muslims and non-Muslims in the United States, 1, 2, 3, what would you recommend?
To improve between Muslims, on whose side? Like, who am I talking to?
Both, Americans, mainstream, and then Muslims.
In terms of speaking to Muslims, I would say, one, that many Muslims have a very triumphalist attitude about Islam, and they kind of fall into a belittling or and I was a victim of this, because when I converted, even though I wasn't raised like that at all, I was raised to respect religions, all religions. But when I converted, that was just the tenor and tone of so much of the Muslim discourse, that all these other religions were just false, and so I think it's important, it's to maintain and believe in normative Islam, which does see itself as abrogating previous dispensations and clarifying the changes and alterations in previous books and things like that. But nonetheless, it still respects other faiths, and I think it's very important to have that respect and to recognize that there's sincerity outside of Islam, and there are deeply devout people that I mean, many Muslims read the verse, you know, that the Jews know the Prophet like they know their own sons. And they think that every Jew knows that Islam is true, and they're just denying it. That's not what that verse means for anybody that wants to take a look at a serious commentary on the Quran, speaking about a certain group of rabbis in Medina at the time. So Jewish people don't necessarily know anything about Islam, and many of them have been raised to believe since they were small that it's just a false religion. So their prejudices about it are as natural as the prejudices that Muslim Sunnis might have towards Shia or towards Ismaili or whoever it is. Prejudices are often introduced at a very early age. So I think that would be a major piece of advice, is to really to have a deference and a respect for other people and their faith traditions. And even outside, because I have a lot of respect for atheists, in that I think atheists are one of the few people out there that really take God seriously. Like, I've never met an atheist that really didn't think about God a lot. And in some ways, one of the great ironies of atheism to me is they have such a good opinion of God, they've ended up having to disbelieve in him. I mean, I find that one of the great paradoxes of atheism, that so many atheists just cannot believe that God could allow some of the heinous things in the world. So they have this such exalted opinion of the summum bonum that they end up having to deny it altogether. So I somehow think that God has to appreciate that in some way. so I think it's just important to have a healthy respect for people, just human beings, that they're all here. And you know, Anthony Flew is a good example of an atheist who ended up becoming a believer. So nobody's a lost cause if you really know the power of God. So that would be the main thing in terms of, and then engaging and talking to people and being open. I think in terms of people of other faiths and creeds and beliefs than Muslims, the single most important thing is, you know, Freud said that if you want to elicit hatred from somebody, just belittle what they hold sacred. You know, I mean, and I think that's a very valid psychological insight into human nature. To mock people's religion, to mock their faith tradition, and that's why I say it goes both ways. But to do that, you know, people who've never studied Islam, I mean, you know, there are people that study Islam because they hate Islam. You know, there are people like that, and I could throw some names out there, but I won't. But there are people like that you know, it's not really Islamophobia, it's mis-Islami. You know, it's a mis-Islamic impulse. They just hate Islam. They don't fear it, and so they study it, and they study it looking to expose its faults, to find all its dark side, and those people do a lot of damage because they're not fair. When you read their books, and I've read their books, when you read their books, they take things out of context. They lie. Very often they're just flat out lies, and they put things that are true in there as well. That there are problems. Every religion has problems in the human tradition of the religion, you know. And then Revelation is open to multiple interpretations. So, and then pre-modern religions challenge, or rather, the modern world challenges pre-modern assumptions about the world that are very important. So, you know, I think respect. I've found in my experience, life on earth, for whatever it's worth, is that people tend to respect you if you respect them. I've rarely found anybody that, there are people that have just chips on their shoulder, they're looking for a fight, whatever. But the overwhelming majority of people out there respect you if you respect them. And I think engendering respect, I mean, the Dalai Lama talks a lot about just kindness, you know, human acts of kindness, what they do. Asking forgiveness, apologizing. You know, the English need to apologize to the Irish, you know, in a really deep way to help resolve a lot of that suffering and sorrow. The European Jewish experience, you know, there's There's a lot of pain there. People carry that around. The Palestinians, in their experience, in their treatment in their own land, I mean, there's a lot of pain. And so just kindness and acts of kindness do so much to mitigate a lot of the resentment and pain and suffering that's out there. Because there is a lot. And it goes all around. It's not, you know, pain is not the property of any one people. There's pain all over. So.
Who are your role models? Who has inspired you, 2 or 3 or 4 people throughout your
living, dead.
Living, dead, the most influential?
I think in the Islamic tradition, outside of the, you know, the first generation, because obviously they're the exemplars for the Muslim community, but outside of the first generation, I mean, first and foremost, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, but outside of that community, I would say from within the Islamic tradition, Sidi Ahmed Zarruq has been an immense inspiration in my life. Ibn Juzay al-Kalbi is another one, and Imam al-Ghazali is another one. And I think from the West, some of the people that most profoundly influenced me, Thoreau was an early formative influence on my life. Reading Walden, and I was exposed to him very early from my older brother, and also my father has had a huge influence on my my exposure to Western civilization culture. So, you know, I think in terms of you know, there's other people. I mean, there's no doubt Malcolm X, Dr. King, are people that I've looked up to, and in terms of politics, I can't really think of anybody. You know, I've never been much for politicians. You know, so.
Among the founding fathers of America, which one is yours?
You know, I think my favorite of all the founding fathers, yeah, it's interesting. I definitely, I have a few. They're interesting. I mean, John Adams is very interesting to me. My father would say Hamilton, hands down, but I don't. He's one that I'm not as fluent with his thought as I am with Jefferson or Adams, but they all strike me. I mean, that generation is just, it's amazing that so many extraordinary people could have come together at one time with the type of just knowledge of the past that they had and political astuteness. So, but I definitely, Adams, I read the Adams-Jefferson correspondence, which was fascinating, and I've read quite a bit of Jefferson. So I'm not totally, you know, I think Jefferson's been lionized of late, but I'm not totally convinced. And then I like Thomas Paine. I definitely, I think I've read 3 biographies of Thomas Paine, and I read the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin. I like Franklin, so I've actually done quite a bit of reading in the Founding Fathers.
Founding Fathers.
Yeah.
But team, any questions?
I was wondering about your conversion. What did you find in Islam, say emotionally or intellectually, that you hadn't found in some of the philosophical figures that we were talking about, with this background in the West, background in philosophy, everyone from Plato to Heidegger?
Yeah. I think, well, first of all, I was very young when I became Muslim. So, you know, I was an avid reader, so I read a lot by the time I was, you know, I mean, I've been reading things from quite early age. So I was an avid reader, and I was interested in religion. But I would say the thing that struck me most about Islam, that I liked most about it, was that it really acknowledged previous religions in a way that I didn't see in other religions. it kind of had this very interesting universal approach, you know, that God had given prophetic dispensations to everybody. You know, that really struck me as true. You know, like the Asians had their prophets.